Yay! Thank you so much, Tina, our guest of honor. The floor is yours. I would invite you to just like recap the premises of the essay, and then if there's anything anyone said during the icebreakers that you want to dive into, feel free. Otherwise, I'll suggest a starting point.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I learned so much I was taking notes just from like the links that people were sending and some of the concepts that actually I've never heard of before. I'm a big fan of Neil Postman, and yeah, have read some of his books, and I actually didn't like never even heard of this post. So Zach, thank you for sharing that, and great seeing you again. Uh, yeah, so many of you have read the essay before, but generally the essay, like many of you said, you might feel like it's relatable. It's related to maybe something that you've been feeling, and like very much so. All the essays that I've written are very much so stem from a personal perspective on technology. I would say that like I practice my day job. I think a lot about, the business of technology, the use case of technology, the future of technology, in a way that is actually very optimistic. Because in order to work, one of my passion is to work with founders in order to build, what's next and what comes next. The default viewpoint is to be optimistic. But I think that this blog, at least in my professional career, has been almost a counterbalance to like this very I think DJ, you also mentioned this being efficiency maximizing. I personally am also a pretty efficiency maximizing person, and also decently competitive at work, where have very high standards, and if something can be automated, I want to optimize it if it's possible. So kind of like I would like joke to my a lot of my more literary and artist friends that I think by day I really am a tech bro in many shapes and form, to kind of participate in the marketplace. And that's kind of something that I wrote about in, about the Malthusian trap of productivity that I am a unwilling and sometimes willing participant of. In the kind of nihilistic hope that maybe, I can come out on the other side still intact. And I think that the block itself is, or the entity of fake pixels for me has always been this kind of spiritual sanctuary for me to explore these larger ideas. It's actually a very vulnerable place. I kind of talk about in the kind of beginning of the essay, just to kind of kicked off, was inspired by a tweet. And actually, the tweet was this guy that I have followed for some time that's a pretty prolific AI builder. And then he basically said he had made this incredible meme of all the vibe coding tools on the market and being overwhelmed by all the optionalities. And uh, basically, he kind of wrote about how he hasn't slept for many days. And he was like, "Shit, I thought this thing is gonna make my life better, but I literally am not sleeping." So that really resonated because that's my experience, at least when I first encountered AI. I feel like, wow, if I had this when I was a kid, I probably would, I don't know if you have seen some of the very kind of interesting manifestation of this phenomena called ChatGPT psychosis, or being one-shotted by AI. And you can see like very powerful figures in technology, like Travis from Uber, kind of talking about how he's figured out the frontier of physics by talking to ChatGPT. And I think it's a very human thing for him to share, because if I am being completely honest, I would feel that way too, because you can ask any question and you can really, look at any subject areas and ask questions for hours on end and really think that, wow, you may have just arrived on this novel insight. And the next second you caught yourself and you're like, wow, I know how this thing works. I have not arrived at anything new. It's a recursive loop that just echoed back what I just fed into the context window. And that took, I was kind of self-examining. All right, like what is going on here? Like why why do I feel this push and pull of these two value systems clashing? And I'm pretty confident that I wouldn't be the only person feeling this way. And that was like basically the genesis of this essay. Many of you have already read the essay, so I do not want to be redundant here. But really, the essay was an attempt to kind of like logically almost prove like what is the dominant strategy to really survive here. Because if I continue to just like spend 24-hour on AI, I would not see my friends. I would not spend time with my husband. I would not eat. And I like basically, if we believe in actually part of me actually am very intrigued by the idea of transhumanism and some of these like more cutting edge concepts from an intellectual level. It's like, okay, are we just like going to maybe modify ourselves and in the future, just like from an evolutionary biological perspective, become, more advanced, or it's actually impossible. And the conclusion is that it's probably impossible, like many of the historical examples that you all refer to, and some of the most essential pieces of life, like education and healthcare. I think that um, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but someone please correct me. But the Baumol effect was actually really yeah, it resonated a lot because I think one of the things that I was like skimming through the Wikipedia page that it outlined was actually there are fields where kind of labor, like a kind of a form of labor is required like at high capacity, like healthcare and education, where you can't necessarily very easily replace kind of the role of like a teacher or a healthcare worker kind of very easily. And the kind of this was also this concept in like kind of called replacement kind of in like economics. Like these roles are like by definition, maybe it's because of the nature of the role, you know, maybe it's the nature of these industries and how the systems actually function. There's something that systematically kind of prevent them from being kind of too productized or industrialized into these efficiency machines. So I think that like it's like interesting to think about how in the past, when people thought about the internet or people thought about manufacturing, I saw in the kind of coming of industrial revolution and what they were thinking back then, and think about, okay, industrial revolution wouldn't stop, the advance of technology would not stop, and these are just the systems that we are all small part of, and as much as we are, many of you here like are maybe builders of technology, creators of technology. I think there is a responsibility to ask these questions, but there's also this larger systematic force at play that makes it very, very difficult to kind of change the way that systems also have its own teleology almost. And in that sense, like as an individual human in that system, what is like what should we do to stay sane and actually live a meaningful life? And that is really the goal of any philosophy, is like how do we live good lives? And through that, I think the kind of conclusion of that proof, which is like a very imperfect proof, was you have to find a set of vectors that you optimize for, and those set of vectors you have to define yourself. So that was kind of the throughput, kind of the genesis of the essay, how it came to be, and kind of the thought process behind like why it's necessary to kind of ask these questions.
Thank you so much. Okay, I really want to jump in here and tie some threads together that have come up. Because I loved, Zach, what you shared in your icebreaker, which is the idea that new technology is transformative. And please step in if I like did not correctly understand your idea. But you shared that new technology is transformative, and like the transformative effect of this new technology is to create an entirely different world. And what I find really interesting about that concept tied to all of the ideas floating around in the salon is that, like Tina was saying, we have this new technology, artificial intelligence, which, like, there seems to be a feeling in the ether of like, this is a game changer. Like, this is a complete game changer. We've never had technology like this. And yet, it doesn't feel like the world has changed fundamentally when we contextualize the use of that technology inside like this culture of labor and efficiency, like existing culture of labor and efficiency. In fact, it seems to like more deeply intertwine us with the same, like, I think the concept you used in your essay was a Malthusian trap. Like, we're like deeper and deeper in locked into this value system. But the tension in her essay is that in the second part of the essay, Tina takes a step back and she's like, okay, does this mean we need to like fundamentally reconceptualize the like measure of productivity? Like, how are we measuring productivity in the first place? And that seems to be the entry point into like, will artificial intelligence actually bring usher us into a new world? From my perspective, it seems like it has the potential to, if we're able to like work out these a different way to like measure productivity and efficiency. Um, but you can also argue like, no, it just locks us into the current world even more deeply. So what do we think, group?
I love that. I think that was great. I'll jump in because you called me out. Um, the example used in Neil Postman's article is if you think about the world as a glass of water and you drop in some blue dye, what do you have? It's like you don't have water with a drop of blue dye, you have blue water. And as a way of kind of illustrating this idea that like we introduce a new technology and it completely transforms reality, it completely changes society. Everything is different. I think there's kind of like a couple things here. Like one of the things I love to do or I love to come back to is um, think about somebody born in 1890 or 1895. The predominant mode of transportation is walking. And if you're very wealthy, you can ride a train. If you're upper middle class, you've probably got some horses and maybe you can ride a carriage. But for the vast, well, you're born into a world where when someone says that they're traveling, they mean that they're going to walk there, regardless of how far it is, right? And then in 1969, you're seated in a house on a couch, surrounded by your grandchildren, and a fucking man walks on the fucking moon, right? That is one human life, right? Those two different those two the whole time period, right? And all that transportation, right? When you were born, people had not flown ever yet, right? And by the time you were 10 years old, the Wright brothers take flight. And then by the time you're 75, 74, a man lands on the moon, right? It's like, and that's crazy. And if you think about that, and now you imagine our life, right? Like I remember when Facebook came out and I was actually too young to join, right? And so you can think like someone somewhere in the near future is going to tell a version of this story about me, which is like I remember dial-up. I remember not having internet at home, right? And so imagine like someone's life, someone born in 1990 doesn't have internet in their home and then sometime in the late 90s they get internet in their home and then play that forward, right? Like who the hell knows what is going to happen in 2069, just to like continue the metaphor forward. So now if you think about this in terms of productivity, there's like I would come back to Neil Postman, which is that like some things will be very different, or some things will be much better, some things will be much worse, a lot of things will be the same, right? Some people's lives will be much better, some people's lives will be much worse, a lot of things will be the same. When you go to buy a house, you buy that house based on the number or the size of the lot by an acre, right? Is the unit. You're buying multiple acres, you're buying a quarter of an acre. Does anybody know how big an acre is? Teresa does.
It's about a football field.
An acre is the amount of land that one man and one ox can till on their own. And here we are hundreds of years later still using the acre, right, as a unit of measurement for all our real estate transactions, right? So if you put yourself forward in 2069 thinking about like what is productivity, right? There are going to be so many ways in which we just like that's going to be completely unrecognizable to us today, right? And there are still going to be plenty of vestiges of the what will then be vestiges of the past, right?
Yeah, this gets into this is sort of the drop of dye into the water, and this is what I was thinking about with Baumol and the Baumol cost disease, which we have certain things that are seen insolvable because we have this fundamentally we've not been able to deal with increasing productivity in them. So I kind of sort of building on your point, it makes me wonder that different world that you're talking about is probably the one in which this technology solves some, but not all, of these Baumol cost disease issues. And we end up with abundance in certain things that we didn't have. So abundance in some things that we don't have now, and yet we're still constrained by Baumol in other things. And the things that we're constrained in, those are the ones that are going to become more expensive, more elite, more restrictive, more markers of status and wealth. And that, I don't know what those things are going to be, but that's what I was reading this thinking, how does this shake up this existing status? Like right now, if you have the ability to have a ticket to a show that only has 100 seats for these 4 people who are playing it, that is a mark of status. It can't be duplicated. There's only 100 seats in that show. That's it. So where are the things that AI or AI in related tech may shake up that? That to me is what I don't know. I don't have an answer for, but I suspect that's going to, if you can figure that out, you're going to get a sense for where society is going to be in 2069.
Yeah, I loved your point about the quartet before Wesley goes. I loved your point about the quartet. I think that's something I'd love to come back to.
Yeah, Wesley, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I think what George brings up here is key. Is like is to really think about where the restrictions or bottlenecks are in the system. Henry George like made this argument that land that you can have like immense amount of productivity as density of people increases, right? But land is this kind of constrained amount. And so naturally, whatever profits or benefits that you get from productivity like flows to the people who own the land. And so you should do something about that, right? I would say that's like one example of like the conversation that's kind of happening today, like with the whole abundance movement and like, and like YIMBY and stuff, right? Is to try to remove the constraint that is the thing that is soaking up all of the productivity gains. When I'm like thinking about like what are good uses of AI, like this is kind of the thought process that I run through as well. As an example, is writing AI to help you apply for jobs. Is that a good use of AI? There's actually a constraint there, which is just how fast can people hire, right? So if you 100x the speed at which you can apply for jobs, you're not going to 100x the speed at which companies can hire, right? So that would be an example of a constraint where it like to me there's like an imbalance or there's some kind of a construction there that is like not healthy, right? Ideally, we should be like trying to use AI for things that are like positive sum, right? Like rather than like kind of being funneled into some kind of a constraint.
DJ?
Yeah, on the Baumol effect, I mean, the most obvious application or the place where it's like most impacting the economy is healthcare. And no one really seems to have a good solution for it. I mean, I've never seen anyone really propose like a bulletproof, like if we do this, then everyone will get good healthcare. Even in socialized medicine countries, basically what you mean is doctors make less money. And good luck getting all the doctors here to make less money, right? But there does seem like there's some near-term applications, like for example, there's no reason an AI can't listen to my doctor's appointment and summarize it for me. And because I mean, I'm relatively healthy, but I do have diabetes. And whenever I go, they ask me a bunch of questions and they suggest a bunch of things. And it's just in one ear and out the other. And it would be nice if I just had an AI summary of that, right? But the regulatory environment is such that they can't just like hook that conversation up to Claude or ChatGPT because they're breaking all kinds of laws by doing that. So it has to be an on-premises AI, and now you've just like raised the cost of rolling it out, training it. It's too distributed in a sense. Um, uh, so that's kind of one area. The other thing that I was just sort of thinking too, like, there's a lot of discourse around the total, fertility rate going down, and Derek Thompson had a really great piece a week or two ago, saying the baby boom was not about like a sudden interest in having kids. It was technology. There was technology that made it easier to have babies. But now, the rest of the world is intruded and sucked up, every free second we have now. And so it's more expensive to have a baby. So I'm not sure how AI solves that problem, but it seems like something that's like $1 trillion opportunity if someone can figure it out. And then just on the job application thing I wrote down, I've been applying for a job uh, for months and months and months. It's really tough out there. And I've had to do now 3 AI interviews where it's literally click on this link, go, and someone talks to you. Someone talks to you. And on one hand, it's kind of humiliating and dehumanizing. On the other hand, the conversation itself is way better than anything I could put on a resume, because it'll ask, what's an example of a tech problem you solved, that I can give the backstory of, the scaling problem we were dealing with and all the constraints on that. No one's ever going to read that on a resume. So I'm really conflicted on what to think about that.
I want to double down on this concept of the Baumol effect that has been bouncing around in conversation, because I was not familiar with this concept prior to entering the salon. So thank you so much for introducing this to me. And I'm going to read out the definition on Wikipedia. Um, it was first described in the 1960s, and it's the tendency for wages in jobs that have experienced little or no increase in labor productivity to rise in response to rising wages in other jobs that did experience high productivity growth. In turn, these sectors of the economy become more expensive over time because the input costs increase while productivity does not. Typically, this affects services more than manufactured goods, and in particular, health, education, arts, and culture. And yeah, I do think that this concept is very central to like this main theme that I'm trying to, I guess, track throughout the course of the conversation, which is how radical is this like Jevons Paradox productivity and efficiency gains phenomenon? How radical is it um that we're experiencing from AI? Like how truly radical is it? And like how world changing is it? Because like to me, what seems, I guess, like a natural idea is that if AI were to like fundamentally change how productive some labor in some other industries that are is not technology, like that would be radically world changing. Um, but I don't know. I'm inviting people to respond, disagree, share ideas. Teresa, you raise your hand.
I thank you for such a winding conversation. And it does circle back to this idea, y'all, I'm just gonna quote you guys. It says, will AI actually usher us into a new world? And then Tina also said, what should we do to stay sane and live a meaningful life? And I find it funny that we're focusing on the word productivity. And the reason I think that's funny is because, of course, productivity, especially in this day and age, is associated with value. Like the more productive you are, the more you can get done and the more you can produce. And that's you're creating more value. But in actuality, hang in with me for this example. Someone who is making infinite money is someone who made a hit Christmas song. That song is timeless. It generates money. We know Mariah Carey is just rolling. That song lasts for years. There's something about that that is valuable because it resonates with our humanity and it is embedded in our culture in a way that has hit time after time after time. On a more serious note, think about authors like Audre Lorde, James Baldwin. They touch upon a sense of culture that is set in a certain time, but it is timeless. And that to me is the ultimate value. Sure, it's not, I mean, it probably could be accounted for in money, in how many book sales they're constantly having. But I do think that this is a question of human value. Like AI does interrogate human value and make us think like, how am I going to compete with this productivity? And I do think I want to circle back to how this is why Tina arrived at the end of the article of like, you just got VU. And that's hard. That's really hard, especially because we don't value the arts. We don't value the voice. We want service. And so I don't think that this is actually ushering us into a new world. This is time after time a question of how society was built, um, which is it is classist, it is racist, it does not value humans equally. It puts us all at a scale such that we are even competing for value, which is insane because all human lives are valuable. And I just want to end off with this quote from Audre Lorde's Poetry is not a luxury. She says, the place of power within each of us is neither white nor surface. It is dark, it is ancient, and it is deep. When we live, when we view living in the European mode only as a problem to be solved, we rely solely upon our ideas to make us free. For these were what the white fathers told us were precious. But as we come more into touch with our own ancient, non-European consciousness of living as a situation to be experienced and interacted with, we learn more and more to cherish our feelings and to respect those hidden sources of our power, our feelings, and to know where true knowledge and lasting action comes from. And that's what I think is valuable. And I think that AI and whatever technology comes after this is constantly going to compete with what is human value.
Does anyone have any thoughts or responses? I mean, I am kind of curious to hear from you, Tina. Like, how did you end up in that like more subjective place at the end of the essay after having after like you have a lot of professional expertise in this realm of technology, objectivity, productivity, efficiency. How did you end up in like over the course of your thinking process where you were really like coming to value human limitations and imperfection and art?
I think I fell in love with technology, probably the same reason why many of you here fell in love with technology. I think technology represents progress. It represents what humans are capable of. It represents the marvel of science. It represents the application of science and art, I think, in many degree, because I think some of the technologies that we use are beautiful and well designed, and you can tell that there were souls in those technology. So but I feel like my interest in technologies has always been from a place where I enjoyed art, I enjoyed literature when I grew up, and that's why I write in technology as well, and that's like a way to express these views. So like that's just addressing maybe the kind of last part of the question, but maybe going back to kind of the earlier question of how do we arrive at this subjective place. I think I really resonated with what Teresa just said, actually. I think that also Zach said something earlier where technology, there are things that got better. Actually, maybe it's Zach, maybe it's George. It's like something that got better, something will be worse, and a lot stays the same. And I think that's actually something that I was trying to illustrate with the essay as well. And a lot of kind of the one reason why I actually like the discipline of economics is that unlike maybe the discipline of natural science and unlike the discipline of some like ever-changing new discoveries of reality, kind of economics, there's a shape of the field that is like both very organic, where it's like, you know, we kind of make the joke of the economists where they can never make really accurate predictions because humans are so like unpredictable, and we know that they're kind of predictably wrong. But economics as a field is like actually really good at explaining phenomena of, you know, what we value is actually driven by supply and demand, and what is on the supply side of the equation, what is on the demand side of the equation shift because of how our values shift. Like, why do we perform cosmetic surgeries? Like, why do we, why are we willing to allocate our spare or discretionary income into Netflix, into seeing a Taylor Swift concert? Like, what is driving those impulses actually have a very different manifestation, like from a actual product perspective. Like, what we buy changes, but the desire in which that drove us to buy those things actually stay pretty universal. And I will say technology is just like a manifestation of these kind of economic principles, that actually economics principles of what we desire, how we want to be perceived, who we want to become. These universal questions actually stay somewhat similar, but the way that the kind of economic forces combine with our collective imagination of new ways of doing stuff, and that's the beauty of technology. When they're combined, it creates all kinds of new unforeseen problems and also prosperity. I think, you know, one thing that we think about a lot about is, you know, in this post AI world, you know, using kind of George's framework, like what will actually be better, what will actually be worse, what will stay the same. Like, I actually think that some of the education, like for example, something that I think about a lot that we kind of maybe hated as kids, where we had to fill out exams and did multiple choices. That seems so silly in the age of AI, like to an extent that because everyone could cheat, those answers become so like legible that probably that test format will literally become obsolete. Like coding challenges, like grinding leak code. Many of you are developers, probably have like experienced that. That also seemed pretty silly in the post AI world. So how will success get measured? Like, it's out of necessity, both economically and also technologically. But like by the end of the day, like it's also out of the necessity of like actually detecting what is valuable. Like, how do I detect that you are going to be a contributor to the conversation, you know, without maybe putting you in a box of like, you have to finish these multiple choice tests that we always have felt as kids that have flattened who we are as people. And now, like, I think someone said it perfectly, where there's this story of like a kind of a traditional physicist or a Newtonian physicist, like when they first encountered quantum physics, like had this entire breakdown of their worldview, and, you know, kind of had this collapse of meaning. I think it's like very interesting to think about, like, now I think in the age of AI, the way that the world is actually becoming that very like a quantum like a reality, where no matter, and that also creates the problem of like self-delusion, where no matter what you put in the machine, you will get a response. Like literally, I think the previous problem was like, okay, there's oppression of the system. Like Foucault's entire philosophy, right, was like, oh, there's the madness, and then if you are not, you know, complying to the norm, you're, you know, put in jail, or you are like in the madhouse. There's a other, like that's clearly isolated from the norm. But with AI, actually, it's actually very validating of a lot of the progressive values, where it's like, okay, you can be anything. AI is going to come back and tell you like, hey, that sounds perfect. I agree with you. Like there's all these jokes about the way that AI talk. And actually, like economically speaking, that's aligning actually a lot of, it sounds really like it really like actually makes me very uncomfortable thinking about this, but it aligns with the business interests of these companies so well, the same way that the same way that algorithms have, where it like feeds us what we want to see. But the AI kind of can do that in like an even more customized way. But so that's like one very tangible example of the kind of duality, like what's getting better, what's getting worse about this particular technology. And the reason why subjective values are so important is that, like, without that, then optimizing for anything else is there's a sense of absurdism in it. I think that I don't know how many of you are readers of Camus, who's like a philosopher in absurdism and a writer in absurdism. I've always wanted to see a Camus novel written in the age of AI, where a man just kind of want to optimize this random metric. It's kind of the paperclips hypothesis, where let's say he just wants to look max. I think there's this like very interesting trend among teenagers that I see online, where people like teenagers will use an app to like look max. It's like, yes, look maxing is for maybe becoming more attractive in the dating market, and that there's definitely a rational aspect and a like a kind of economic aspect to it. But it's like hard to say that that's really it, right? Like maybe the better way to get girls is to go to a bar and talk to one versus look maxing via an app. And then maybe in the future, because so many people are look maxing, like we'll see on dating apps, like men are getting more and more handsome in their profile photos. But then when they meet a woman, they like collapse. I'm just giving a very arbitrary example. And similarly, you can optimize for the value of, let's say, money. Like I met Zach via a crypto company that I created. But in the crypto market, I have a lot of criticism of the market, but at the same time, I also think crypto is like one of this other technologies that have many dualities. I think that, the global financial system is, especially in emerging markets, is a very kind of government-controlled system, where like a citizen's or individual's wealth that they've accrued over their lifetime can really evaporate it because of the whims of a centralized government. And that's something I deeply care about, and that's why I work in this industry for some time, solving this problem. But with crypto, like it comes with speculation because of it's permissionless, and when the technology is permissionless, then like very naturally you can't prevent what people will do with it, and like the economic outcome of a technology like crypto, and the kind of game optimal way, if the optimization maxes you're optimizing for is cash made, then like you can actually just trade crypto all day, or go to like if you look at Wall Street trading, and there's another value system there, and you can opt into that game and potentially be an active player there as well. So if I think that maybe the kind of more concise way to say all of that is AI as a technology, and just technology and software maybe in general, and the information technology as a medium has actually given everybody a lot of agency to pursue their values to the maximum, and to an extent that they could never before. You can actually participate in the financial market at a larger scale than you could ever before, with new rails that are being built. You can look max to an extent that you can never before with the technologies of plastic surgery and with like Photoshop, like look maxing apps. And so being on the other side, everyone, including all of us here, and including myself, definitely, I am optimizing for something, and I just have to be, at the end of my life, be proud of what I've optimized, and that I would call it meaningful life.
Are you look maxing? Is that what you're doing?
Am I look maxing?
Yeah, are you look?
I don't think I am look maxing.
No, look maxing is such a funny one, because it's such a great example of something I think you're touching on here, which is like optimizing for something and completely missing the point, right? Yeah. It's like you're gonna optimize along this one vector, look maxing, and then you're gonna end up in a best case scenario here is you end up in a relationship with someone who only likes you for your looks, which was not the original point. That's like not what you started look maxing for, right?
So I kind of want to like pull this around on to Teresa's point, and the agency is exactly right. This is not, there's choice, there's agency. we can, as a society, as individuals, as people, figure out how to direct resources in ways that are uplifting. Is there a way that you could use these tools to direct a larger share of resources to things like the arts, to things that are more, in other words, and there's agency to this. Is there a way that this can be directed in a human way that I think collectively we would agree makes everyone's lives better or not? And there is agency in that.
No, DJ, you raise your hand. Please
Oh, I
step
mean, is she
in.
gonna answer first? I mean, I don't wanna ask.
Or
I have another
Teresa.
question. I just didn't want to interrupt. So.
Well, no, I was actually I was gonna bring it back to you because of your comment that I suspect that somewhere there's a 15-year-old kid about to produce the next Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll address that quickly. I mean, I remember when YouTube started. I remember when 9 other video platforms started too. There was a bunch of those. Um, and YouTube was basically just a piracy platform. I mean, early on, its most popular videos were just people ripping stuff off of The Daily Show, and things like that. And then some people started actually then there was like the viral stuff, like whatever, the kid at the dentist, just sort of random funny videos. And then people started actually creating like for YouTube. And by then they'd been bought by Google, and everyone else was just an also ran, you know. Um, but I want to sort of throw out like a counter example. It's not about AI per se, but it is about scale. Uh, well, I'll just say it. Every now and then, it seems like every day, this is like what the algorithm is giving me. On like Google News, I'll read about some OnlyFans creator who makes millions of dollars. And at first I thought this is bullshit. They're not really making that kind of money. But there's some who really are making like extraordinary, life-changing amounts of money at like 22, 23 years old. And of course, it's women who are doing it, right? It's the asymmetry there is, shockingly different. And there's a part of me that's like, well, you go, girl, get your bag. Uh, I'm not going to judge. But on the other hand, I mean, I've looked into it, and they have these like, they're not even the ones who are chatting with the guys, right? Like they have these agencies that do the chatting, and so they've scaled their beauty to the point that thousands of people will pay them $15 a month just to feel like they're interacting with them. And I don't know. I somehow that doesn't feel right. I mean, on one hand, yeah, absolutely. I don't judge them, make all the money, but on the other hand, it's like, is this really what we want in society? And then I'll take a less gendered version of it, which is online gambling. Um, it's I think it's absolutely be banned. It's only around because of a Supreme Court decision. It's not like we all got together and debated and thought about thoughtfully what should it be. So I don't know. There's these sort of dystopian paths where some technology is going, and um, the thing is, these things are really hard to regulate, both technically, but also like once there's a moneyed interest behind it, it's just really hard to like put the genie back in the bottle. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that, but that's my.
I have a take here based on what George and DJ, what you guys have been saying, which is one that I've been kind of like stewing on, but haven't necessarily voiced. So it might be a little rough, but there's like there's like we have agency, we have the ability to do things, and we have, and kind of coming back to where Tina was going, it's like it's very important to have a set of values and to try to live by those values, right? And that's where it comes to when it comes to agency. And I think, but where that stops is what other people do, right? You don't have agency over other people, not really. And you have agency and those decisions have consequences, and you kind of have to like be willing to live with those consequences. And we end up in this world of like, we should all get together and try to do this thing, right? We value art, so we should all get together and try to like make it so art is more important. And that's where you end up in this world of like trying to have agency over other people, which best case scenario is suffering in like the Buddhist version of the term, right? It's like comparative mind, it's just suffering. You're just like putting yourself through unnecessary suffering. Worst case scenario is totalitarianism, right? It's like if you do actually leverage any amount of agency over other people, you're really the only way to do that is by force. And so it's like we're talking about, oh, it's artists, right? It's like we want to invest more in art, right? But it's like, but it's still like if you actually exercise agency over other people, you end up in this world of totalitarianism, which is not good. That's not what we want. And so where I come back to is this idea of like going back to this example I had of like what will life be like in 2069 when we're all sitting around the couch with our grandkids and watching whatever the future equivalent is of the moon landing. It was like what we can't predict what the world is going to be like, and we can't predict the most optimal way to like navigate the time between now and then. But like what would reliably lead you to a happy life in 1890, 1969, 2025, 2069? It kind of comes back to just, I think, it kind of just comes back to three things. And this is getting into where Tina ends the article, which is like there's really just three things, and that is character, your personal character, right? Like living by your values and for yourself. It comes back to community, right? Like the community that you have around you. And it comes back to family, right? It's like who are those people who are sitting on that couch with their VR goggles watching who knows what with you, right? Like some compelling first time thing that we're all seeing, right? Somebody landing on Pluto. I don't know, whatever ends up being. And the nice thing about those three things is you have full sovereignty or agency without having agency at someone or agency over someone over all of those three things.
Thank you, Zach. Yeah, I'm so glad we're talking about value explicitly because this is one of my like personal fascinations is the concept of value and its relationship to money. And Leslie, the three things were character, community, and family. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, where I was going with this, I wanted to bring it back to Tina's point, or like what Tina was speaking about when she was describing how economics as a discipline is like very useful for understanding what are like universal human desires. And technology ends up being a manifestation of that. That to me was related to what Zach shared about, you can't really exert agency over other people. You can only exert agency over your own like individual sovereignty. And so, yeah, like you can value art all you want, but if you want other people to value art, that's something you don't really have control over. And value in so many ways, like this is such an overloaded term because we use it to talk about like, oh, well, the character wise, like what are your values? Like what do you value? But we also use it to talk about quantified things. And I just feel like these two things are conflated in a way that makes it very hard to like
Right.
they're conflated in a way where like it's very hard for monetary value not to influence like our intangible like unquantifiable values. And I think the interaction between that in our economy and art is fascinating. Like art seems to be like something that we just, it's a circle that we can't square. Um, so yeah, just wanted to surface that connection. I forgot where I was going with this. Apologies. But I also loved, Teresa, when you shared this point that like, anyone remember Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You? Like she made millions out of that song. Like somehow, like against all odds, there's this kind of labor that goes into creating an artistic good that just, I don't know, like maybe AI is gonna write like $1 million top chart topping hit and I'll eat my words, but like that just seems to be a type of labor that can't be optimized. And then it also goes back to the idea of like, what are we even optimizing for in the first place? What, like the scope of what artificial intelligence can optimize seems like it's not actually infinite when it comes to labor. And then we're back at the Baumol, the Baumol, the
So
Baumol effect.
I think one
You're
thing to
such a
remember.
good host. Sorry to interrupt. That was so
I,
good.
Oh, thank you.
Go
I
ahead,
would
George.
say that I think on agency, remember, agency is individuals, and economics fundamentally is the aggregation of individual choices. And so when I'm talking about agency, I'm not talking about like imposed sort of society imposing anything. I'm talking about the individual agentic individual choices that people make that can be leveraged or changed through technology. And the aggregation of those individual agentic choices can lead to a different society. And one of the things that you can do with that is you can try to convince, try to educate, try to show people about how those agentic choices can be different. I mean, we're literally on a platform in which this has been done. Anna's vision created this. That was an agentic choice on her part, and it has led to substantial change. Now, is this AI, does new tools, do these things become a way in which individual agentic choices can lead to something different and something better?
I mean, yeah, and I think this like also speaks to what Tina was writing in her essay is like being conscious of this like psychological Jevons paradox pressure, like that pressure that it's exerting on people operating within the technological industry or whatever like industry that AI is very successful at optimizing. Maybe that pressure can be a force to like that actually forces people to take a step back and be like, wait, why are we doing this again? Or like, what is worth doing? I think that's kind of interesting. DJ, you've raised your hand. We have like about 8 minutes left, and I just want to make sure, Jamie, you've been quiet. Wesley, I know you had some other things to attend to. Trey, just want to make sure people who have been quiet have the opportunity to speak if they would like to. Jamie, Trey, Wesley. It's also okay if you don't want to. If so, I'll just pass the mic to DJ.
Um, I'll just maybe chime in with one or two points. Um, so there was a bit about Teresa's point earlier about the whole Mariah Carey and doing Baldwin and stuff and being sort of remembered for that. I think that sort of goes both ways almost. Like it's like if you look at Tolstoy's stuff about his writing, the stuff he writes is quite bad, and well, not bad, but it's not great. But he doesn't like for stuff which he is now remembered for, or sort of Louisa May Alcott for Little Women. If you read her final one, is it Joe's Boys, I think, and she talks the final bit of it. It's quite funny because she's just like, I wish all these characters just died in an earthquake type thing. So the stuff you're remembered for as a novelist or an artist might not be encapsulating all you who sort of see yourself as a person. If that makes sense, it's not like a unremitting positive of being remembered for his great Christmas song. You can be remembered for his work, which you view disdainfully at best. And in terms of optimizing, you kind of touched on whether an AI could sort of optimize songs. I think to like to some extent, I think it could in terms of just replicating what humans do. Like there's obviously human songwriters, but I mean, this is obviously the wrong crowd in terms of demographics. But Eurovision, I know the big Europride song contest thing. It's over the last like 25 years, it's kind of been monopolized by Swedish songwriters because they sort of are able to know the sort of trends and stuff, and it's like a ridiculously high amount of songs are now written by Swedish songwriting teams who have optimized what the sort of European sound is. And so I think if a similar trend could emerge just from AI, I'm not like fully au fait with like for technology and stuff, but if humans can do it, I don't see why it can be at least attempted by an AI. But that's basically it. And now others to speak.
Thank you. Wesley, do you want to go next? And then I'll go to DJ.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to this this point about, or this question, I guess, about like whether or not AI can write like a hip hop song. I mean, I would assume so. There was a like maybe at the margins, maybe like for extreme experts or something like that, like people who are real connoisseurs of music, maybe they can tell that the thing is AI and like it's not great or whatever, right? But even that, I'm not so sure. There was a I participated in, there was a not you're right, Astral, or like not Slate Star Codex, but like whatever the sequel of it is. He had this thing where he had like a bunch of people, his readers, like go in and like try to figure out if a particular piece of art was AI generated or not. And so I took the survey, and of course it's like a very biased, like set of people and everything. But one of the things that came out of the survey is that the people who don't like AI art and self-proclaim themselves as experts in art only did marginally better at figuring out if something was AI compared to everyone else. I said I like AI art and I'm not an artist, so I have bad taste. So I don't know, right? Like it was a difference of like I guess like 60% correct, and then like the experts were like 68% correct or something like that, right? So it was like, it was very close. But going back to the thing that I said before about personal achievement, I actually think it doesn't matter, right? Like we have for a really long time now computers that can play chess better than humans. So why aren't humans watching computers play each other? Like if computers are like right, like the best thing at it. And the answer is that there's this kind of like a human element to it. Like there's a thing about like wanting to be able to do it yourself. I think that's always going to be there, right? And if magically AI makes it so that people have lots of leisure time, and maybe we are in like this Keynes world of like everyone is just kind of pursuing like their like all of their pastimes, right? I think people are still going to like work really hard and grind at like getting good at chess, even though, right, it's completely pointless from a productivity standpoint. Right?
Absolutely. And that's something we didn't even have time to unpack, which is like the value between labor and productivity, because there's something that about labor, like certain forms of labor that are just like doing the labor itself is rewarding. Yeah, exactly. Labor of love. Thank you, Tina. Okay, DJ, and then we'll close out as it's 8:28.
Yeah, just I'm gonna go out on a limb here and guess everyone here is college educated. Is there anyone here who's, just high school graduate or whatever? So I've done mostly tech for a long time, but the last several years I did real estate, and I ended up having, not by choice, having to manage a property in Branson, Missouri. Has anyone here ever heard of Branson, Missouri? It's like it let me put it this way: God and country. That describes Branson, Missouri. It's if you were put it on a political thing, it's one of the reddest areas in the country. It's country music, it's guns, it's religion, all those things. And in the course of managing that property, that was the first time since like I was like 19 maybe that I've had to work on a day-to-day basis with people who didn't go to college. I was used to working with not just college educated, but like extremely smart people, and while most of the people I worked with were terrific, they're great people, there's a substantial chunk of people who are not built for the modern economy, right? Getting them to pay rent with their phone, is a involved process of showing them how it works, right? These are the people, Tina, who get scammed in crypto stuff, right? They're the ones who answer that dumb text message. And I'm old enough to remember when NAFTA was passed, and I was a big fan of it, still am. I'm part of the kind of the neoliberal consensus that lasted for so long. But there's this deep undercurrent of resentment that I had no idea was going on. And that has, profoundly affected our politics in the last 10 years, and also really globally it's going on. And so, one of the great things about tech, or I wouldn't say great, but one of the reasons tech has evolved so quickly is it's almost completely unregulated. There's specific sectors where it's regulated, but in general, it's anything goes. And the original sort of the Adam Smith proposition of economics was political economy, right? And economics has come to dominate our thinking, I think mostly for the good, but we gotta pay attention to the political part, because you'll be blindsided if you don't. And I haven't seen anyone write a really good piece about this beyond just sort of leftist, just hand wavy stuff, or on the right UBI type stuff, which I don't think is workable at all. And I don't know, it's like I said earlier, Facebook at first was fun and cool until it became a vector of like weaponized disinformation. And I think we really need to be thinking seriously about not just like can AI be used for that, but is it also going to cut off a lot of people at the knees and plunge them into misery, whether psychological and financial, and then one day we wake up and I joke, I was arguing with a guy online about crypto, and he wants everything to be on the Bitcoin standard, fiat is evil, get rid of fiat. And I said, if you did that, you're talking about a 30% haircut on the economy, that would have like far reaching effects. And his response was, well, maybe the economy needs a 30% haircut. And I said that if that happens, it's not like people are suddenly going to become libertarians. Instead, they're going to go find all the billionaires and kill them. The political part you cannot ignore. And I just haven't seen anyone really grapple with that.
Thank you for leaving us with like the most like charged idea at the end of the salon. Thank you for no, this is really great. That's fantastic. I would love to let Tina have the final word because she's the guest of honor. But I just want to say thank you so much for joining. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Tina, thank you for writing the essay and publishing it on Substack and giving us all a reason to congregate here. Um, and yeah, if you have any like follow-up thoughts after the salon, email us at hello@interintellect.com, or like, yeah, we'll figure out how to keep the conversation going if you want to. But Tina, final word.
Thank you, Lilia, for being the most amazing host, and you are incredible at what you do. So thank you for the session, and thank you everybody for being here. I learned a lot, and I think all the questions that we're asking are exactly why I write, to be quite honest. It's like exactly why, like, yeah, like it's very important to be asking these questions. I guess the last word is, I think that there's a paradox inside of technology where for people that are innovating and creating all these world-changing technologies and whatnot, It's again, the most inspiring part about humanity is like making new things that make our lives better. But at the same time, I think because of that, and because they need a business model to sustain themselves in order to do that, like there's like kind of fundamentally structural ways where with changes, some people will be undermined in that process. So I do think that it's important to be thinking about that. And it's very difficult when you are I think we're all perpetrators and victims of the same, like of the system. And I think that's like actually something I wrote about in Above and Below LLMs, where there's a really famous post by Venkatesh Rao that many of you may know. He used to write this, he wrote this post called Above and Below APIs to talk about gig economy, where like if you are the upper like class, you're above the API. If you're below, like you're kind of behind this DoorDash API call. And I think we're all training data for LLM, the centralized LLM machine, including the researchers, like who are actually probably the beneficiaries of the system. I would say that they're also kind of donating their youth into making this big machine that ended up extracting all their time, maybe away from their family too. And so we're all, both above the LLM in a way where we're all users of it and beneficiaries of it. We can do more things with it. And we're all below it as well, where we are like all a small cog of this like bigger machine. And kind of that comes back to this like bigger question of value. What is value? Like, how do we come up with our own value? And actually, to Teresa's point, how do we care about, how do we invest more into things that we value, art, literature, beauty, humanity? I think that one of the benefits of the internet is that it brings people like this together. And like, that's something that we could never do before. Like if the entire village disagree with us, then we're exiled, we are hanged, or we are burned to the ground. But I think internet gave us the platform to find like-minded people. And I think with that, a lot amazing things can be done, and a lot of important questions will be asked. So thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you so much, everyone.